Hey guys, Nick here and welcome back to another video. Today we're going back into Davinci Resolve and we're going to start taking a look at 3D animation and that sort of stuff inside of Fusion in Davinci Resolve 16. Now before we do any more advanced tutorials on 3D space, 3D text, we're going to go through the basics of how a 3D scene in Fusion works in this particular video. So I am going to go through the absolute basics. So if you've done 3D before inside of Fusion, it's probably not for you, but let's have a quick look at what we're going to be creating in this video. Cool, so that's it, nothing super crazy. 3D text sort of comes in, flies in, you know, we've got some nice cool little like rim lights here. You can tell it's 3D text. Again, just going through the basics. So before we start, let's jump into Davinci Resolve, and I've got the project open here that, you know, we created that animation with, and I just wanted to show you sort of how we've got it working. So we've got all our 3D components over here to the left. Then over here on the right, we have our 2D components. We've got our media out and our background. And you can see over here, we got some lights set up. We've got our 3D text, which acts just like normal text. So if in the inspector, you know, I can go through and I can change the color of this text. It changes in real time, and we've got a camera and a renderer. We're going to go through how all that works, but just so you know, not that many nodes, less than 10, so 9 nodes to get this scene working. Super easy. So what we're going to do is we're going to go to the media pool, and you can do this wherever you want, and we're going to right click and just go new Fusion composition and call it whatever you want. And we're going to double click to open that, and we can close the media pool down. And you can see all we have is the one media out node, and I'm just going to quickly arrange everything to the grid and align all tools to the grid, just so everything snaps around. Now for this tutorial, make sure whilst you're in Fusion that you have both viewers open. We're going to be using both of them. If you only have one viewer open, it's just this button here where in the top right. So if you got one open, you're going to have 2 rectangles, click it just so you've got the 2 viewers. 3D in Fusion works a little bit differently. What we're going to do is we're going to drag a 3D text node down into our node editor, and then I'll show you exactly what I mean. So all our 3D tools, we have all our shortcuts on the far right of our toolbar here, and you can see we've got image plane, we've got shape, text, we've got merge, we've got camera, light, and a renderer. We can also access it via the effects library tools under the 3D panel. We have a lot more options there. Or if you want to use the shift space hotkey, and you can bring up your select tool and you can type in 3D, and it's going to bring in all your 3D tools there. For the sake of this tutorial, we're just going to grab a 3D text node down and slap her down there. And what we're going to do is we're going to connect that to the media out node. And as you can see, nothing's working. If we grab the output, it's not connecting to the media out node. Why is that? Well, it's pretty simple basically. So all 3D nodes, whether that's a shape, image plane, text, act in 3D space. Whereas the media out node revolves around 2D space. And you can't connect 3D space into a 2D space node. You need it to go through a completely different node. We need what's called a renderer 3D, which is this last node here. So we're going to create that and drag that down into this center there. What a renderer 3D is going to do is going to take all the inputs, whether that's the text, whether that's shapes, lights, everything that we're going to set up today, it'll take all of that and convert it into a 2D image. So everything on the left of the renderer is going to be in 3D space. The renderer will convert it to a 2D image, which then in turn allows us to connect it to our media out node, which, like I said at the start, revolves around 2D space. So we can do that really easily. We can drag our text node into the renderer, render it into the media out node, and now we've got something popping up in our viewer. You know, we have our transparent background because we've got nothing there. And if we click on our text 3D node, you can see over in our inspector, which we can open by hitting our inspector, it looks just like a 2D text node. It's exact same sort of parameters and everything that we can change. So let's just type in something here, and the text pops up as you would expect. We can sort of have a look at it. We can change the color, do whatever we want. What we're going to do, let's change it to like a sort of like a tealy kind of color. Very nice. And we can change the font if we want to change the font. And again, we can change the size of the text. We can change the tracking. World is your oyster. And if we have a look over here, these are all the same sort of settings that we have available in a 2D text node. It's exactly the same. there is a setting that is a little bit different. And if we go to the text, so the very first option in our inspector, and scroll to the bottom, we can see this extra one here called extrusion. And this is where we're going to basically create what is like, basically the text at the moment is a flat 3D image, so it has no depth, although it does revolve in 3D space. And we can make it 3D. And to see that better, what we're going to do is we're going to drag our text 3D node and put it into our viewer one. So just click that node, drag and drop, boom. And now we have our 3D space. And if we move around, you can see exactly what I mean. See how it's kind of flat right there. Now, moving around in 3D space is complicated. I will try to leave link in the description on the controls and how to navigate in 3D space. I won't tell you how I'm doing it simply because I use a magic mouse. So a magic mouse, if you guys are familiar, doesn't have like a left or right click, and I'm using a Mac. So anything I tell you probably won't correlate to whatever you guys are using, standard mouse, but I'll leave instructions in the description on how to navigate in 3D space. But you can see we can move around and all that sort of stuff, and we can see that it's flat text. So what we're going to do is we're going to play around with its extrusion. So let's just extrude it, and you can see straight away, even in both viewers, we can sort of see something going on. Okay, so if I were to rotate around here, you can see now instead of flat text, we've got a little bit of depth to it. We have, well, it's 3D text. And we can get a bit of a better look at that. If we hit this drop down arrow next to this little white sort of circle, we can change how we see the text. So if we go wireframe, it's going to show us what it actually looks like in sort of 3D space, what the shapes are actually made out of, gives us a better idea. And that way you know exactly sort of what you're playing around with there. So let's just drop that back down to shadows. And we're going to turn off wireframe. There we go. All right, so this is giving us a good idea as to what the text looks like in 3D space. The thing is though, in this viewer, we're seeing some shadows and we're getting a little bit of that 3D pop there, but we're not seeing it here in our media out node. Why is that? Well, it's because we don't actually have a light built in. So what this viewer is showing us is just like the default lighting, just so that we can see what we're working with, but we don't technically have a light in the scene. And that's why the media out node is just getting a flat image with no depth whatsoever. So we're going to add a light, and we're going to add just a spotlight for now, just the one on the toolbar here, keep it nice and easy, and we're just going to bring that down. And to connect that to the text 3D node, we can drag the output to the output of that, and it's going to create a merge 3D node. Hopefully, if you guys have been using Fusion for a bit and following my tutorials, some of this is going to start to look a bit familiar, because we have over here, we have a normal merge node. Merge 1, we've got merge 3D 1. They operate in the exact same sort of way. They connect different elements of your composition together, allowing you to then output them to a single node. However, with a 2D merge node, as you can see here, we have our background, foreground, mask, and then our output. With a 3D node, there is no limit to how many inputs you can have. Because we're in 3D space, it doesn't matter if there's a foreground or background. So we have scene input 1, we've got scene input 2, scene input 3, and it's going to go on and on and on. So if I just drag a couple more spotlights down, just to prove my point, we're going to drag them down, bang, bang. And you can see they just connect, and we can just keep adding them, all right? And that is, like I said, it's because in 3D space, foreground and background isn't as important because we can manually control where they're actually located. So if we have a look in the viewer with our light selected, we can see we got a little bit of a weird thing here. We got like this blue diamond or cube or whatever you want to call it with like a cone. So all lights in Fusion are represented by this sort of cube-ish diamond shape. This cone is specific to the spotlight, and that's because each light operates a little bit differently. And we'll go into them right now, actually. Let's go to the media pool, let's go to the effects library. We're going to drop down 3D, we're going to drop down lights, and we're going to add all the different lights, ambient, directional, and point. All right, and what we're going to do is we're going to connect them all together, and we're going to have a look at how they all work. In 3D space, we have two different ways of moving objects around. So you can see that by default, the spotlight has these green, red, and blue handles. They correlate to the different axes, which we can see in the bottom right corner here, red being X, green being Y, blue being Z. And literally if we grab one and we can move it around, and see where we place it in 3D space. Very nice, very good. And if you wanted to say rotate it, well, if we go to the left here, we can change it to a rotate tool and we get a different little bit of a gizmo, but acts the exact same way, okay? So what we're gonna do is we're just gonna go to move. So that is the spotlight. So let's move all the other lights out. So we've got the ambient light, and you can notice again, this looks a little bit different. We don't have the cone, we just have a blue diamond, all right? Again, all these lights operate a bit differently, and we'll go through that in a little bit. Directional light, we're gonna move out here. Again, different again, and the point light, just move out a little bit here. All right, so if we click the Merge 3D and we put the Merge 3D node here, now we can see everything that is going on. We've got a lot of different lights, and we've got our text lighting up like the 4th of July. What you can see here is we can see all our lights here, and if we were to move some of them around, you can see on the text there, we're getting a little bit of getting some light fall off. But we're not seeing anything in our media out node. And that is because by default in Fusion, inside Davinci Resolve 16, lights do not automatically go through the renderer. We have to manually turn that on via the Merge 3D node. So you'll notice here with the Merge 3D node selected, if we go over to the inspector, the very first option is pass through lights. Without that selected, the lights do not go through to the renderer. They sit in the 3D space, they are there, we can move them, we can see the effect on the text, but they are not completed and compiled into the final 2D image that we're getting in our media out node. So the first step is to select that merge node and hit pass through lights. Great, we've done that. We're still not seeing anything. Why is that? Well, now we need to talk to the renderer and make sure the renderer is going to render out lights and shadows, because by default, it does not. So let's select that. And again, in the inspector, literally it's the first thing here. Enable lighting and enable shadows. Now we're getting an exact replication, albeit in a 2D form, of what we have here in our 3D space. And if I move the lights around, we get a representation. Now everything in our 3D space is being converted into a 2D image via the renderer that can be viewed by our media out node. And if we were to go into the editor and we drag our 3D comp down in here, our Fusion comp, and we go through, we can see what's going on, okay? And we can change things on the fly. So if if we want to change the text, we can change it. So if we want to make it a bit darker even, and then we go back to the editor, you can see that that has changed. Great, so let's start looking at the different lights inside of Fusion. So I'm gonna do that by disabling them all, except for the ones that we're gonna look at. So a spotlight. We have this blue diamond, which is the light source. We have this little cone here, that is the light direction, and it acts just like a spotlight you would see in like a theater. And as you can see, as I move it in and out, we're getting a controlled light source here, similar to the Pixar light. Now, if I have the spotlight selected, we can change the color of the light, so it can be a different color, and that's going to dynamically sort of change with the color of the text. So if I change it, we can get a little bit of light there. But we can also go down here and we got the cone angle, and we can increase that or decrease that, make it a very, very sharp light. And we can also change the penumbra. Now the penumbra is basically like this, I guess how harsh the edge of the light is. So if I bring that to none, you can see we have this very harsh edge here. But then if I increase that a lot, you see we get this really soft fall off there. But at the moment, we're just gonna play around. See, we move it in, move it out, and the further we move it out and relocate it, we can light an entire scene. And like I said, it acts just like a spotlight would in a theater of some sort. So let's disable that and plug in the ambient light. So the ambient light, as you can see here, doesn't have a cone pointing out or anything like that. And that's because an ambient light is simply just that. It is a basic light that fills the scene and it doesn't cast any shadows. So if we increase the intensity a bit, you can see that we're getting the scene lit, but we're not getting any shadows. That's because ambient lights do not cast shadows. They just fill the scene with an even amount of light. Generally, you'll use an ambient light to, like I just said, fill the scene with light, and then you'll add in your directional, your points and your spotlights to create all the shadows and more realistic colors. So that's the ambient light there. Doesn't matter where we put it in the scene. I can move it back here. I can move it all, if we want to see how far away it is. Doesn't matter where we put it. It doesn't change because it's always just lighting the scene evenly. Whereas with the spotlight, it does matter where we put it because the spotlight has a light source and a direction, so it does actually matter as to its location in 3D space. All right, next one, directional light. Directional light, similar to a spotlight, has its light source here, and these lines that we can see coming out of it, that is the direction that the light is going. However, unlike a spotlight, it does not matter where this directional light is placed in the 3D scene. All that matters is what way it's facing. So currently the light is facing towards our text, and if we were to change the intensity, we can change the intensity, change the color, we can do whatever we want, but it's pointing towards the text. If we were to rotate it, so we've got the light selected, let's hit to our rotate tool that we looked at earlier, all of a sudden the light comes from another direction. And again, it doesn't matter where this light is placed in the scene, it just matters what way it's facing. So if I come point it from behind, increase the intensity, make it real red, we're getting this nice red backlight that we sort of had in that sort of demo I showed you at the start. So let's disable that, and point light, the last one we're going to look at. Simply put, point light is basically a light bulb. It is a light source that emits in all directions from its location in 3D space, and as you can see, as I move it around, it lights the text up depending on where it is, and it does matter of it as it's to its location, and it acts just like a light bulb. So that's the easiest way to think of them, I guess. All right, so now that we've had a look at how the lights work, let's light this scene and get some animation going. So what we're going to do is we are going to use the point light to light the front of the scene. And so I'm just going to literally we're gonna bring it right out here. All right, and where are we? And let's plug the ambient light in as well. See as we get a nice fill light there. So let's move this. No, let's just put it there. That's kind of cool. Give it like a cool color so it looks like that. And then we're going to use the directional light to come from behind and give us sort of like a rim light here that you can see. So let's just have a look at where that directional light is facing. And we're going to change the color to more of an orange, sort of get that orange and teal. Let's just kind of move it around till we get like a really cool. There we go. All right, so now we have our text looking very good right there. What we can notice though now, hopefully, if you've been following along, is that the text isn't centered. Now, if we wanted to, we could select our text and we can move it up or down to center it, but we don't want to do that. We want to, in 3D space, we don't want to move the text to decide where it sits in the frame. We want to create a camera and use that. So let's add a camera to the scene by grabbing the camera 3D node here, dragging it down, and again, we can just connect it to merge 3D node and it will be there. So now you can see here in the viewer, we have our camera, and it looks just like an old film camera. It has a white line, that is where we're looking, that is what way the camera is pointing. We've got this blue rectangle here, that is the film gate, so that is what is in the frame. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna move this camera, I'm gonna move it back so we can see the text. Perfect, and as you can see, the text is automatically displayed in our media out, and that's because the renderer, if it sees a camera in the scene, is going to automatically switch to it. However, you can use multiple cameras in the scene, and then that's where, if you go to the renderer 3D, you can change the camera at the top here. But by default, the moment you add a camera to a 3D scene, the renderer 3D will use it as its eyes to create the 2D image we see in our media out node. All right, that seemed quite complicated. Let's jump to our camera 3D node and have a look at some of the settings here. It's gonna act pretty much just like a normal camera. We got our focal length, so we can have a really wide angle camera. And if I move that closer, we're gonna get some pretty funny distortion going on. Super sweet. Or we can have, a telephoto, so we can move it right up to 35mm. We can change where the focal plane is, so that's what focus is on, but we're not gonna look at that for now. We're just gonna move the camera so that the text is roughly in the center. Now everything is centered perfectly. We're gonna create our animation. And like I said, we're not gonna animate the text, we're just gonna animate the camera coming in and out. So what we're gonna do is we are going to move the camera behind so we can't see the text. And at frame 0, we are going to, actually let's start at frame 12. If we go on over to our camera in the inspector, we go to the position, let's keyframe just the Z axes. So the translation is the movement, rotation. So we're gonna just keyframe the Z axis, and that's because we're moving it along the blue. The blue is the Z axis. So we're gonna keyframe it, going to move forward like 12 frames. I'm going to move it so that it's just inside the frame. And we've got a keyframe there, and then I'm going to move forward to frame 118, and I'm literally just going to move it ever so slightly. So what we end up getting is this real fast movement at the start, and then real slow, gradual move out like so. So it looks pretty good, but we're going to want to add some motion blur just to help sell this, make it a little bit more realistic. We can do that the same way we add motion blur in a 2D fusion scene. So we're going to grab the render 3D node, going to go to the settings in the inspector, and we're just going to click motion blur. That's going to apply motion blur to everything coming into it. So anything moving and animating is going to get motion blur that comes into the renderer, and we can increase the quality a little bit, get like a nicer blur. So now if we come in, obviously it's going to lag a bit, but yep, cool, very good. We got some motion blur, and then obviously it fades out. Now we're going to look at one more aspect before we finish up this tutorial, and that is how do we integrate 2D elements? Well, like I said at the start, everything to the left of our renderer 3D node exists in 3D space. The renderer then converts it into 2D space, meaning that everything on the right-hand side of the renderer 3D is in 2D. So if we wanted to place like a background behind our subscribe button so that it isn't transparent, we can grab a background node, and we can literally drag the output of that to the renderer 3D, and it will create a normal, regular merge node. And we can create our background and do whatever we want there. So we can create a nice light gray background. What you notice, we can't see anything. That's because just by default, it's put the background in the foreground and vice versa. So we're just going to grab the render 3D node, going to put that in the foreground. The background can go into the background. And now we have our background there. And obviously we can change the color, do whatever we want to do. Very nice. And we can go across into our editor, and everything is going to come in. And there you go, guys. 3D text in Davinci Resolve. We've got lighting. We can change everything on the fly. And hopefully you've learnt the basics on how to create a 3D scene inside of Fusion. It is certainly complicated, but once you understand that you just need 3 particular nodes to get everything working. So you need your 3D object, you need your merge 3D node, and then your render 3D. And you understand that the render 3D converts 3D space into a 2D image, then you should be off to the races and you should be able to start creating your own 3D scenes. Like I said, this video is just a precursor to the more advanced tutorials we're going to be doing, and hopefully going to start recreating some movie title scenes inside of Fusion for some upcoming videos. Anyway, guys, that's it for this video. If you enjoyed it, like always, make sure you hit that thumbs up button and subscribe to the channel for more videos like this one. And yeah, until the next video, guys, I'll catch you all later.